All right, joining us now, co-founder of Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter Global Network, Alicia Garza. She's the author of the new book entitled The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. Alicia, explain the many ways this topic of coming together when we fall apart might be now a better time than ever, really, given what is happening in the Black community during this time and this election.
Absolutely. And good morning, Mika. Thanks for having me on. So I think for our book, what we're really talking about here is how it is that we get more power to more people so that the conditions in our communities get better. And in this book, I really thought I was going to be talking about Black Lives Matter and how it came to be. But what actually came to me when I started writing was that there's so much lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years for me of organizing, 7 years of this movement, that I think are helpful to people who are looking at what's going on in our country right now and saying, how did we get here and how do we turn around? And so this book really is about how we offer what I call hospice care to that which is dying away, which I think, is literally all of the things that this administration is offering us in this moment. And also how to offer prenatal care to the things that we want to birth, to the country that we actually want to live in. And that's why I'm really excited that The Purpose of Power is out today.
And explain what motivated you to write this book. I'm reading about even your upbringing and how you were inspired toward advocacy. But why this book now?
We're in the midst of a moment that is going to be historic. And frankly, 10, 20 years from now, we will be studying this moment and asking ourselves the same questions that we're asking now. How did we get here and how did folks turn it around? And for me, this book is really about helping us understand how it is that we create change. There's so much about what happens online. There's so much about protests out in the streets, but I think there's very little about the offline work that happens to be able to change the rules, change policies, and change culture so that we can change the things in our lives that we can no longer accept, like wage gaps that disproportionately impact women, like police violence that's disproportionately impacting Black communities and Latinx communities and Indigenous communities. So for me, this book is really something I want everybody to put in their back pocket as we're figuring out how it is that we not only take advantage of this moment of unprecedented crisis and opportunity, but also how we build the future that we deserve. And I'm offering lessons from 20 years of organizing experience, but also things that I'm unlearning and things that I still have yet to learn. And it's a unique inside perspective from someone like me who has spent most of my life trying to change the rules and change practices so that we can live better together.
Jean, jump in.
Alicia, congratulations on the book. I have one question, which is how do you address the cultural divide, the sort of tribal divide that we have in the country now? The people who just instinctively and reflexively reject even the words Black Lives Matter and go into a crouch, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, but rejecting the very idea and not showing openness, frankly, to letting sort of new thoughts in and letting new ideas in.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a few things that we have to be mindful of, and I talk about this a lot in the book. The power of stories to shape our perceptions and our actions. Make America Great Again is a very powerful story, and it brings all kinds of perceptions about how people want this country to be. It says explicitly and implicitly that there was a time that was better than this that we are trying to get back to. And unfortunately for women, for people of color, for Black people. That was not a good time in our lives. But what those stories do is it galvanizes people to take action. Black Lives Matter has also done the same thing. And I think when we're talking about how we build the kinds of movements that can have power and impact, we do have to pay attention to the stories that we're telling, who is telling those stories and for what purpose. And we have to also start telling stories that include all of us. In my book, I talk a lot about what it means to include the waking amongst the woke. I talk a lot about what it means to speak to the things that everyday people care about that actually are the majoritarian values of this nation. And so much of this moment really will be about us not just finding our tribe and finding the people who agree with us, but it will be about expanding, right, and growing. As my friend says to me all the time, organizing is about addition and multiplication and not division and subtraction. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the book as well.
Alicia, it's Willie Geist. Congratulations on the book. Great to have you back on the show this morning. I don't know if a lot of people realize, but the term Black Lives Matter is credited to you starting from a Facebook post back in July of 2013 after the death of Trayvon Martin. So I'm just curious on a human level if you can believe what has happened with a simple phrase that you put in a Facebook post that once seen by radical as some people now put into the corporate mission statements of major companies across the country. What is that like for you?
It's incredibly surreal. And, you know, Patrice and Opal and I talk about this all the time, that we are honored and humbled to be the smallest piece of such an incredible, important, and global movement. And I want to take the opportunity to just say that there are thousands of organizers and activists who are working tirelessly every single day to build and lift and advance this movement. And so really the credit belongs in all of those places. I also think a lot about what we have to do here moving forward. And what I know is that there are so many people out there, like I said, who want to figure out, where do we go from here? And are the divisions in this country able to be bridged? And in my book, I talk a lot about how we do that. I talk about the fact that it's important for us, right, to get a better sense of where we've been in order to understand where we're going. I talked about placing myself in a context, right? I talked a lot about my mother and how she really reflects and represents the challenges that Black women face every day, but also the hopes and dreams and where those hopes and dreams can take this nation. So to me, we still have a lot of work to do, and I'm really ready to start to invest in that prenatal care that we need to build the country that we deserve.
The new book is The Purpose of Power: How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. Alicia Garza, thank you very, very much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.